So there's a lot of things that can make, of course, our what digital missionaries, what Catholic creators are doing easier. But the thing is, there's a lot of content that's being produced, that's mass produced, that's no quality, not attractive. And yes, a lot of devotional content that's out there that says things that saints said that's not true, or have other things which are good things at the end, good messages, go to mass, etc. There's a lot of deepfakes right now of the Pope. Oof, a lot of deepfakes from that are inviting to do good things, and we have to be wary of those things, and also put a line, because even though they're inviting us to the sacraments to do good things and they're orthodox, let's say, it's not the Pope.
Jose de Urquidi, it's fantastic to have this opportunity to be with you this morning. So, what we want to touch on, since we have limited time here, is the Juan Diego Network, the people that you work with. You guys know influencers, you know the social media landscape better than anyone in the world. With AI, with emerging tech, what are some of the opportunities that you see ahead that can really help with evangelization, that can really help and have a positive impact on people's spiritual lives? But also, what are some of the challenges? I know early on we were talking a little bit about deepfakes. There's a lot of things that are happening.
Oof. I don't know if 25 minutes will cut it, or half an hour, but so many things to talk about AI. The challenges, well, I think are very evident. But let's try to start with the cool things of the evangelization. It helps us, and let's say Catholic creators, in a lot of ways, to do our job faster, right? Like the research, which we have to verify or choose good sources, like Magisterium AI, etc., right? Because if not, oof, so many things, like ChatGPT still thinks Pope Francis is a pope, right? If you don't ask directly. So there's a lot of things that can make, of course, our what digital missionaries, what Catholic creators are doing easier. But the thing is, there's a lot of content that's being produced, that's mass produced, that's no quality, not attractive. And yes, a lot of devotional content that's out there that says things that saints said that's not true, or have other things which are good things at the end, good messages, go to mass, etc. There's a lot of deepfakes right now of the Pope. Oof, a lot of deepfakes from that are inviting to do good things, and we have to be wary of those things, and also put a line, because even though they're inviting us to the sacraments to do good things and they're orthodox, let's say, it's not the Pope.
And then, Jose, what do you think are some of the solutions for that? Because as the technology gets better, it'll be harder and harder for someone who's not, doesn't have the tools to completely verify. How are they going to be able to tell the difference? I know that there was some, borderline comical in some senses of, the Pope Francis with the big Gucci outfit. I think for most people, they knew pretty quickly that it wasn't. But if we're looking at, this video technology that's getting really good, the photo cameras and the AI software, I mean, it's going to be I think for a lot of people who don't have that much time and there's so much content coming out, where can you hold on to? How can you tell the difference?
Well, it's as it has always been, no? Like, go to the sources, which is freaking difficult for Catholics. Because yes, we want the real, we want to highlight it, and we just like four filters and not go to the sources of our faith or of what the Pope is really saying, not a commentator or a AI commentator in YouTube, and of course not a deep fake. But so difficult. Like, we need formation around this, and and of course it's all discernment. But we're poorly formed as Catholics in general, right? And then we receive these videos that have good things, or that say good things apparently, and it's so easy to fall into a trap. But it's all about discerning, right? So we will need to start doing a lot of things in the church, and thankfully Pope Leo knows this, and we're going to get some really cool surprises next year, the end of this year, next surprises next year on this whole thing. That a lot of it is the same thing that we have always thought is the answer, but we have poorly done it. No
Mhm.
formation.
And, and Matthew, how do you see using AI to help confront this challenge of deep fakes and of kind of this overwhelming sensation of too much information?
Well, I mean, let me start by acknowledging I agree with everything as they said. I think there's opportunities and there's significant challenges here. I mean, one of the amazing opportunities I think that AI is kind of bringing to the whole influencer space is probably some of us have seen how you can like voice clone, right, and sync, right? So if we record this podcast in English, effectively I can then like an AI can come in and change my lips and actually have me speak Chinese, right? Which is incredible, right? Because then I get to reach people in Chinese. So it's like that's a really great example of how kind of like a so it's almost like a deepfake technology, right? It's actually put it at our service. And so when it's useful, right, and we're choosing it because it serves mission and it makes sense, AI can be an incredible unlock for bringing people the gospel, right? So I think I'm really excited about that. Of course, the deepfakes things is obviously very troubling. We're all very aware of, I think, why this could become a major problem, right? The Pope, even a deepfake Pope video made with the right intentions, but being just a little bit off doctrinally, can cause massive ripples around the world, can cause all kinds of issues. So, so I think there's two parts to this. One is I fully agree. The best way to mitigate the downside of this is just ensure everyone's got solid formation, right? I mean,
so easy to get.
Yeah, if everyone got solid formation, they're gonna be like, that doesn't sound to me, right? And let me go check it out. And Matt is like, he never said that. So now I know. But I think that there's a responsibility, I think, on the platforms and things as well. And I think that the church, among governments and other organizations, should be lobbying the platforms to say, listen, you guys effectively are very capable of detecting when something's a deepfake, right? So if somebody's uploading a piece of content to your platform and you detect that it's an AI and they're impersonating, right, a public figure, right? I mean, or really anyone, right? That's not cool. You have to, I mean, in the very least, they should have to label it, right? And say like very overtly that this is AI generated content, right?
But you know what? For instance, the deepfakes. So we started creating a list because, well, listeners, etc. The voice of the Pope. That's one of the channels in YouTube. If you see the description at the end, it says it's AI generated. But every thumbnail, the Pope said whatever. The Pope gave this special blessing. But it says at the end, it says it. So they label it. But still,
that's not enough. Like totally. Like I actually think like, and HeyGen does this, for instance, right? There's a watermark on every frame. Like when the video starts, you can see right there. Like, and I think it's supposed to be kind of a universal standard that this is AI generated content. So I can't escape it. And this is also the crazy thing for audio too. There has to be some kind of watermark, right? Where it has to acknowledge this is AI generated content. And this is difficult, it's difficult to roll out, right? Because there's lots of regulatory and it requires a lot of cooperation between the companies. But actually, I think in the end, you're going to find the companies are, first of all, probably going to welcome this in a lot of ways, because there's a lot of risk for them as a platform, right? I mean, if they get involved with spreading misinformation and things like that, they open themselves up to litigation and things. So I think it just requires they have to know that the governments are going to be turning their guns at this. And if they know that it's coming, I think what you'll see is a lot of cooperation amongst the companies to work on a protocol like this. It just takes a little nudge. And I think actually the Pope ones in particular are particularly a big concern. And I think if the church itself was to get involved in saying, hey, listen, like YouTube, you got to do something about this because, the Holy See is not cool with the deepfakes. And so we know you can do something about it, so please do.
The thing is, where's the line, right? Because, okay, AI generated, but you know how YouTube has the categories, right? Entertainment or whatever. And if it's not news and it's entertainment, you can have even fake news, right?
Right.
That's a fact.
Right.
January that I spent, I don't know, like half an hour, Cardinal Tagle, he was trying to ask me and try to see how to see. He said, there's a lot of videos in YouTube about me saying that I'm going to be the next Pope, that I made a pact with Francis and stuff. And he was so like, I've talked with everyone, but they can't do anything because it says at the end, like they're entertainment, no news. So they can say whatever.
Yeah.
And some deep fakes, some other stuff. It's like, there's no line.
I mean, it's
where?
Yeah, it's seriously like a deep concern, right? Because in the end of the day, we don't want necessarily a particular government determining what's real and what's not.
Or company.
Or a company, yeah, because obviously they don't have a great track record, right? So we all know that. And so I think, and we should be deeply uncomfortable with it. And so I do think, right, like I think that there's varying degrees of like necessity here. Like I think one is, which I think is really obvious, right, is that if a piece of content is generated in the voice with the image of a particular person and it's not that person, like that person effectively should own their own representation, right?
Exactly.
You shouldn't, they legally should have like some kind of like copyright over their own image and their own voice. And if you use that, right, without their permission, that should open you up to possibly for litigation, right? So that's it's new grounds, and obviously that legal precedents are going to be very sparse, and obviously it's complex. But I think from a common sense perspective, there isn't a person alive like who would be comfortable with people just taking their image and voice and doing whatever they want with it, right? So I think like from a grassroots perspective, you'll probably find that policymakers will have a lot more success enacting laws on this because there'll be such overwhelming grassroots supports. And then the question is like, where do we go from there, right? And I think that could be negotiated. And certainly when it comes to like reporting information that's actually not true, but things that you did. So they're not using your image or your voice, but they're reporting on something you did, which is not directly supported by evidence, right? And so that would be like an area that we obviously want to look at. But that becomes a lot more challenging, right? So I think we start with the whole personhood thing, the sovereignty of the person, and then we go from there.
And even go like the Vatican with Pope Leo. I think we're going to start having the Vatican push some of this, not just like the person, but as an institution who, well, will be and is part of the conversation, as you know, well, with you and so many others, but people inside the church. The Vatican will have to be very clear with that. Like there can't be anything from the Pope, etc. And the Vatican will have to guide away somehow in so many different ways.
I think that's what I'm excited about, like especially the work that you're doing and the opportunities we have to work on. It's like there's really an opportunity here for the church to champion something that is really important and actually touches everybody in the world, right? I mean, the Pope fighting the battle to ensure that people aren't deepfaking what he says, right? I mean, in fact, what he's doing is he's championing a cause which all of us should have a stake in.
There's a lot of support.
And I think that's really exciting.
Exactly.
And I think because he's I think he's the greatest like soft power in the world. He's the most influential moral figure in the world. I think there's a company alive who wants to fight him on that. So I think if he comes out and the Vatican comes out and says, listen, this has got to stop, what they're going to have to effectively do, right, in order to respect what he said can apply to anyone, right? So it really is going to come down to I think there will be tactical challenges, but really this is going to come down to will. So how much do the companies, the country care about moving on this? And I think when it comes down to what the Pope wants and you know what hill the companies choose to like die on, right? I just don't think this is one they're going to want to die on.
No. And then Jose, if I may, how do you see the relationship between the local diocese, the bishops, the priests, with the Catholic influencers, as influencers take a disproportionate amount of effect, amount of influence, for lack of a better word? You know, many of these young people, oftentimes, they have millions of followers, and they can really sway the conversation. They can focus on their own, you know, what they see as a critical issue or a priority, and sometimes for wonderful effect, and sometimes, obviously, you know, it can kind of become a very negative cycle, and it can really.
What you're talking about.
How does that relationship, how do you see that changing? And what are the ways in which the local priests, the local bishops can really build a constructive relationship with these influencers?
I love that question because there's a lot of work behind the scenes that has been happening these last almost, like 3 years and a half, 4 years with the Vatican. And now that's sort of rolling over to conferences of bishops and even dioceses. We have some pilots going on. But first of all, it's part of the ordinary magisterium, right, of the church, the recognizing the online, because we have to start there, right? Recognizing the internet as the new missionary frontier. It's a new Areopagus. It's where people are at all day long. We're at here.
Yeah.
Right? They're spending time. Yes, there's vices, but there's something they're looking for. They're longing for purpose, for love, for the truth, for God without knowing it. So who's there leading them to Christ, introducing them to Christ, his love, his mercy, and walking with them towards the fullness of the truth, towards the church, the sacrament. Well, if the church institutionally hasn't, and we're too late in the game, well, there's a lot of lay people and priests and religious that have been doing it, some for a while, right? In podcasts, YouTube, and started with blogs. You remember those, et cetera, et cetera. And now the church recognizes they are missionaries in this digital continent, as Pope Benedict coined it, 2009, right? And they're doing the same thing that we were called to do: go and make disciples of every nation, go to the ends of the world. That's what they're doing. So it's not a new thing, the same mission. And what have we always been doing when we encounter a new place, a new culture? Because if you ask a sociologist, yes, the internet has the elements of a culture. No, it's own language, customs, et cetera, et cetera. We found out a new culture and we sent missionaries. And they were there. Of course, they know the language initially. Xavier went there. He didn't preach in Spanish to the Indians, right? In India or Japan or China or whatever. He had to learn the language. But since the beginning, he was a witness. And since the beginning, he was preaching, let's say, with his actions and seeing the seeds of the verb in the local culture. And then he knew the language, he engaged, and, well, presented them or introduced them to Christ. So the church recognized that. Now people are at this new culture. It's the new missionary frontier. And what has the church always done? Formed them. They didn't, you want to go on a mission? No, of course, they were formed. They were accompanied, of course, it was letters, and every so often they came back in a boat and took whatever. There was letters going back and forth, and they were supported by the superior or the bishop, right, the religious superior. That's what we have done, and of course, it's been like dangerous. And we know a lot of stories of martyrs didn't come back because yes, difficult culture, the pagan cultures in a lot of ways, and also a lot of them, yeah, the culture was too attractive and became pagan, right? We don't know that many stories, but there were a lot of them, right? So the internet's the whole thing. But we need to form the digital missionaries going there, accompany them, right? Well, send them, of course, and support them. And those four things are now part of the ordinary magisterium. So that's happening. Local, like bishops are called to have an encounter with their local digital missionaries. But he lives in Dallas and most of his followers are in New York. We are, like, jurisdiction wise, you live this diocese. This is your shepherd, right? Even though it was the same thing with books. He loves that here. And yes, they were going to be sent somewhere else to be sold. Doesn't matter. You have your own bishop. So now bishops all over the world and in the US starting in different ways. But now we have pilots in which they're meeting their local Catholic creators, getting to know them, ask them questions. Why are they doing this? What are they doing? What's in their heart? And then accompany them. And yes, that sometimes means, hey, as you said, like, no, you're going this way. Truth is important for us. It has to be within this bounds. Charity is also important. It has to be this. We're trying to be one. And then looks different with diocese. That looks different. Sometimes it's a new thing, a digital ministry office somewhere, or under evangelization, or under the communications department. The thing is, the bishop, our shepherds, are recognizing them. They're missionaries in the same mission and accompanying them while they do evangelization and bring people, not for more followers for people to continue doom scrolling and just likes or listens or views, but to bring it to the church. So that's happening. It's part of the ordinary magisterium. A lot of conferences are working on it. Some dioceses are very open, already piloting all over the world. And that's, I don't know, that's very exciting. It's a new missionary chapter in the church.
That is very exciting. And Matthew, as you know, AI and emerging tech continues to be more and more integrated into the local churches and into the universal church, where do you see opportunity to, help these influencers get their message better across, use AI, and help the local diocese also use AI so that when, people are intellectually converted, they are able to find a home, they're able to find a parish that can suit their needs?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I mean, I think there are platforms that are struggling with this issue of what we call off-ramping, right? Which is when users stumble across our platform, it could be because they watched a podcast and they heard some idea mentioned and they wanted to look into the idea or ask questions about it. And so they come across Magisterium AI, right? Or they end up on the Hallow app. And in the process of asking questions and getting answers, that sometimes they may effectively be intellectually converted, right? But then they need to take the next step. So then the question is, where do we off-ramp them to, right? I think this is still a very important area where we need to kind of figure out what that kind of pipeline kind of looks like. I mean, we send them directly to the parish, or we send them to kind of a middleware platform that help them find community, or
both,
or do both. Yeah, and I think that there's a real opportunity for the laity. I think it's really important that the ladies step up and recognize that figuring this out is something that we have to do. Like, we have to lead on this, and for no other reason, our pastors are busier than they've ever been before. It's not necessarily their domain of expertise, like technology and the new media. And so as much as possible, we have to step up and say, how can we lead on this? How can we demonstrate and run pilots and demonstrate the effectiveness of it? And also just acknowledge that, and we were talking about this earlier, I mean, God is calling not just priests to serve and preach the gospel, but laity. So it's also effectively have the humility to recognize that God may have imbued a certain destiny, he may be calling us to serve. And then, so, and finding ways to nurture that vocation. And I think a lot of this comes down to, I think, leadership at the diocese. And I think, too often, I think we take, and I'm speaking for someone who used to work for an archdiocese and a chancery, right? Too often in the archdiocese, we can think of ourselves as more like the Inquisition, right? And not enough as shepherds, right? So everyone my pastoral responsibilities, doing confirmations, ordaining priests and so on. And then effectively most of my time is on saying, you can do this, but you can't do that, right? But obviously the pastoral role extends well beyond that. And ultimately, like a shepherd who is going to be effective in role, as we one where the sheep feel deeply that the shepherd cares for their interests and who will be willing to risk his own life, right? And pour his heart and soul to ensure that their souls are safeguarded. And I just want to say, like, I want to echo what Jose said, because I think it's probably the most important point here is like relationship. I really believe that when someone is possibly called within the diocese to be a lay missionary, a lay influencer, that has to be, that call has to be validated, of course, and verified. But if that call is there, then it's important for the local priest and for the bishop to develop a deep and meaningful relationship, which is really based upon care and concern and love for that person. Because if they feel that my priests and my bishops are reaching out because they love me and they want to support me in my ministry, and they feel that there's something that God has called me to and I'm effectively doing, well, then they know that the influencers, that they have their back, they're going to be much more open, right? To say saying, hey, by the way, I watched your last podcast. You might want to consider emphasizing this, right? And you know this because I love you and I support your mission, not because you said something you're not supposed to do. It's my job to step and say, like
Cancel you.
That's right. So I think and I know this is difficult because, again, bishops are as busy, priests are as busy as ever have been before. But I do think I'm speaking as a layperson. When there's a layperson in our diocese who has calling, I am totally cool, like with getting a little less FaceTime with the bishop or my priest to ensure that vocation is respectively nurtured, because I know that person will reach far more effectively people, and because I care about winning souls for Christ like anybody else, that person succeeding will mean more souls, and I think that's a tension, but I think that's ultimately that the lay people have to rally around, support their bishops and priests in this particular outreach.
And Jose, in the final moments here of the podcast, because we're mindful that you have to go. You're here in Rome as part of the Jubilee and the digital missionaries. What's something that stood out to you here during this visit, or something that you've learned that you're excited to take back home to Dallas and work on with the network?
Oof, so many things, but I think like a new thing. Oof, a lot of things, but mostly we've been doing this, working with influencers from all over the world, and then before the synod, and then doing different things here in Rome and the Vatican. One of the things that's the best thing that happened, even through Zoom, seeing that they're not alone. No? Seeing the faces, like the testimonies of these people, like, oh, I thought I was alone, and now I see there's a lot of other people doing it. But well, I sort of knew that. I knew, but I don't feel alone because I saw the Pope call me digital missionary and talk, like when he appeared on Tuesday, the last Tuesday of July, right? And gave these cool remarks. I saw the Secretary of State talking. I saw the pro-prefect of the Dicastery of Evangelization. I saw the prefect of the Communications Dicastery. I saw all these people that are like, they're in the Vatican, that seems so far away. And they talked about digital missionaries. And they say that the church wants to like sees us, recognize what we're doing. That changed everything. And we have a lot of testimonies these last several years of people who are like, yeah, I'm done. And when we started having these Zooms with people here, and then having these special, like sending, I don't know how you call them, like ceremonies or whatever in Zoom, that you're being sent online to evangelize and bring people to the truth. Everything starts changing because we're called to be one. And yes, we're apostolic, right? Successors of the apostles, like it's a thing. We're Catholic, 100% Catholic. So for everyone now going back to their places and seeing the church saw me, and now I also can go, and I feel can go and knock the door at my bishops, the communication direct, evangelization, whatever, in the diocese, and start walking with and tell them about everything, the things that are coming for evangelization. Because pastoral, everything, but also like evangelization. That's what we need to be doing.
Totally.
Where people are at, right?
Yeah.
And it's risky, of course. there's a lot of risk with being online. And yes, it's not like giving a nihil obstat open book, like recognizing it's not like, okay, you're a valid certificate, Catholic influencer approved. Doesn't mean that, right? Like now you have carte blanche to do whatever. But you're a missionary and you're being accompanied by the church. Seeing that in the faces of people from all over, that changes everything. New missionary impulse going back.
Beautiful. And on that note, Jose, thank you so much for the incredible work that you're doing. And Matthew, Jose, it's been a real pleasure to speak with both of you today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.